The silence was the first betrayal. Not the profound, restful quiet of a forest at peace, but a hollow, hungry silence that had begun to devour the edges of Arcadia. Lyra felt it in the marrow of her bones, a discordant hum beneath the soles of her feet, a world holding its breath before a final, rattling sigh. Others in the small, sun-baked village of Oakhaven, nestled precariously in the rugged folds of the Peloponnesian mountains of Greece, complained of the thinning game, the withered olive groves, the streams that now merely wept where they once sang. But only Lyra heard the true sickness, the fading of the silent song, the earth's own vibrant heartbeat. She stood now at the edge of the petrified Carrier Spring, its once moss-softened basin a chalky, cracked wound in the earth. Dust motes danced where water had once shimmered. Her eyes, the colour of deep forest pools, mirroring the green of summer leaves and the brown of winter earth, were clouded with a sorrow that seemed too old for her 22 years. Her dark hair, usually a wild tangle adorned with unintentional gifts from the woods, a stray leaf, a burr, a feather, was pulled back, exposing the slender column of her neck, and on her left wrist, the distinctive spiralling fern-frond birthmark that Elara, her wise old mentor, had always touched with a strange reverence. "Still listening for ghosts, Lyra?" The voice, gruff but not unkind, belonged to Calin, the village elder. His face was a roadmap of Arcadian sun and wind, his beard the colour of winter frost on dry grass. He leaned heavily on his gnarled olive-wood staff, his gaze fixed on the barren spring. Lyra didn't turn. "The song is weaker today, Calin. The silence, it's growing." Calin sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. "The silence is hunger, girl. The silence is fear. The gods of Olympus are displeased, or the land is simply tired. We need rain, not riddles about songs only you can hear." He poked the dry earth with his staff. "The old ways are failing us. The sacrifices to Zeus and Demeter yield nothing." Lyra's fingers traced the edge of the stone basin. "The old ways are failing because the song itself is failing." Elara's voice echoed in her memory, as clear as the bird-song that had once filled these woods. "The song isn't heard with ears, child, it's felt. Like a truth you forgot you knew. It binds all things, the stone to the root to the deer to the hunter to the stars. When it fades, the world unravels." But Elara was gone, turned to dust beneath the whispering pines 3 winters past, leaving Lyra with a legacy of half-understood lore and a profound, aching sense of responsibility. The birthmark on her wrist tingled, a familiar sensation when the song was particularly faint, or when her thoughts strayed too close to her shrouded purpose. "Elara spoke of the Heartwood," Lyra said softly, more to the memory of her mentor than to Calin. "A place where the song is born, or where it can be mended. Deep within the mountains of Taygetus," she said, "or perhaps near the Styx itself, where the veil is thin." Calin snorted, though a flicker of something, unease, perhaps, or a buried memory, crossed his weathered face. The Heartwood, a grandmother's tale to frighten children from wandering too deep into the forests of Manalis or the shadowy glens of Erymanthos. If such a place existed, girl, don't you think our ancestors would have sought it out when the blight first touched the vines, a generation ago? They journeyed to Delphi, they prayed at Dodona, but found no answers. "Perhaps they didn't know how to listen," Lyra murmured, her gaze distant. She could almost feel the tendrils of the blight spreading, an invisible fungus choking the life from the land, mirrored in the fading resonance of the song. The joy was leaching from Oakhaven. Laughter was rare now, replaced by worried whispers and the sharp edge of fear in every voice. Even the children's games were muted, their energy sapped by the pervasive gloom that had settled over their corner of Greece. She remembered Elara's hut, nestled deep in a thicket of wild laurel near the slopes of Mount Lycaon, the air always fragrant with drying herbs and the subtle scent of wood smoke. Elara, her hands gnarled as ancient tree roots grinding herbs in a stone mortar, her voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate with the very pulse of the earth. "Your mark, Lyra," she'd said one evening, her eyes like embers in the dim light. "It is a key, a path. The song knows its own." But a coughing fit had seized her then, a harbinger of the illness that would soon claim her, and the rest of the explanation had remained unspoken, lost to the encroaching silence. The silence of the Carrier Spring was absolute now. No trickle, no drip, no sigh of moisture, just the dry rasp of wind against stone. And beneath it, for Lyra, the yawning emptiness where the song of water should have been. A sudden commotion from the village drew their attention. A thin, wailing cry, followed by the agitated barking of dogs. Caelan straightened, his expression hardening. Trouble. They hurried back, Lyra's lighter footsteps easily keeping pace with the elder's more deliberate ones. At the centre of the village, near the ancient gnarled oak that had given Oakhaven its name, a small crowd had gathered. Theron, a young shepherd, knelt on the ground, his shoulders shaking. Beside him lay a ewe, its breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps, its wool matted with a strange dark slime. "It's the wasting sickness," someone muttered. "The third one this moon." Lyra pushed through the onlookers, her gaze fixed on the dying animal. She knelt, ignoring the slime, and gently placed her hand on the ewe's heaving flank. The fern on her wrist pulsed, a dull ache. She closed her eyes, reaching out not with her hands, but with that other sense Alara had nurtured. She sought the ewe's faint, flickering song of life. It was there, a fragile thread almost lost in a cacophony of pain and decay. And beneath that, something else, a discordant, predatory note, cold and invasive, the same note she felt in the blighted land. "There is a shadow on its spirit," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "A shadow?" Caelan scoffed, though his eyes were troubled as he watched her. "It's a sickness, Lyra, like the one that took your parents when you were but a babe here in these unforgiving Greek hills." The mention of her parents sent a familiar pang through Lyra. She had no memory of them, only Alara's vague tales of a fever that had swept through their isolated homestead near the Neda River, leaving Lyra, the sole survivor, found wailing in her cradle by the old herbalist. Alara had never elaborated, and Lyra had learned not to ask, sensing a sorrow too deep to disturb. The ewe let out a final shuddering sigh, and was still. A wave of despair washed over the small crowd. This was more than just the loss of an animal. It was another tear in the fraying fabric of their survival. Theron looked up, his face streaked with tears and dirt. "What are we to do, Elder Caelan? The flocks fail, the crops wither, even the forest yields little. Are we cursed by Pan, or have the nymphs fled our woods?" Caelan placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, his own face grim. "We endure, Theron. We pray. We make our offerings at the old altars. What else can we do?" Lyra stood, the coldness of the ewe's fading song clinging to her. There is something else, she thought, a desperate resolve hardening within her. Alara believed there was. That night, sleep eluded her. The silence of her small, sparsely furnished hut pressed in, amplifying the frantic thrumming of her own heart. The image of the dying ewe, the despair in Theron's eyes, Caelan's weary resignation, it all coalesced into a single unavoidable truth. Waiting was no longer an option. The silence was not just an absence of sound. It was an active, consuming force. She rose before dawn, the air chill and carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from the surrounding Greek mountainside. From a small wooden chest beneath her sleeping pallet she took out a worn leather pouch. Inside, nestled amongst dried herbs and smooth river stones Alara had cherished, was a small, tightly rolled piece of parchment, brittle with age. Alara had given it to her just days before she died, her voice a mere whisper. When the silence grows too loud, this may show a way. But the path is not for the faint of heart, child. The heartwood demands a resonance. Lyra unrolled it carefully. It wasn't a map in the conventional sense, but a series of swirling symbols and cryptic verses, depicting landmarks she vaguely recognized from Alara's tales of the deeper, wilder parts of Arcadia. The weeping crags near Tegea, the serpent river that snaked towards the Alpheus, the grove of whispering stones close to the ruins of Lycosaura. And at its centre, a larger, more complex symbol that resembled a tree with roots reaching as deep as its branches stretched high, a symbol Alara had called the Anarasa, the breath of all. The heartwood. A shiver traced its way down her spine. This was madness. Caelan was right. These were likely just old tales. And yet, the tingling in her wrist, the persistent echo of Alara's certainty, the undeniable decay of the world around her. She had to try. She packed little. A small water skin, a flint and steel, a sharp bronze knife Alara had used for harvesting herbs, and a loaf of hard, dry barley bread. As she stepped out of her hut, the first pale fingers of dawn were painting the eastern sky over the Peloponnesian peaks. The village was still asleep, a huddle of dark shapes against the lightening horizon. A figure detached itself from the shadows near Caelan's dwelling. It was the elder himself, his staff in hand, a small, sturdy pack slung over his shoulder. "I thought you might be foolish enough to try," he said, his voice low. He didn't sound angry, merely resigned. Lyra clutched Alara's pouch. "I have to, Caelan. There is no other hope for Oakhaven, for Arcadia." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable in the dim light. Then he sighed. "Arcadia is a harsh mother, Lyra, and the deep woods of this land, they do not suffer fools gladly. Alara filled your head with too many stories from the before times." He paused. "But she was wise in her own way, and the land is dying." He shifted his pack. "I will not let you go alone. If there is even a sliver of truth in these old myths, perhaps two fools have a better chance than one. Besides," a rare, wry smile touched his lips, "someone needs to make sure you don't get eaten by wolves from Mount Pholus before you find this magical tree of yours." Relief, so potent it almost buckled her knees, washed over Lyra. She hadn't realized how much she had dreaded facing the wilderness entirely alone. "Thank you, Caelan," he merely grunted. "Save your thanks for when we're not freezing or starving. Which way does your magic scroll point, Songfinder?" And so, as the sun climbed over the scarred peaks of Mount Mainalis, Lyra and Caelan left the sleeping village of Oakhaven behind, stepping into the growing silence of the Arcadian wilds of Greece, chasing the faint, fading echo of a dying world's last hope. The first days of their journey were a descent into a landscape increasingly alien and hostile within the familiar borders of their Greek homeland. The paths Caelan knew from his youth, paths that once led to hidden springs near Mantinea or hunting grounds close to Orchomenus, petered out into choked thickets of thorn and dying bracken. The trees, ancient oaks and towering pines that had stood since the days of Pelasgus, stood like gaunt skeletons, their leaves withered to a brittle brown or already fallen, carpeting the forest floor in a rustling shroud of decay. The air was heavy, unnaturally still. Birdsong, once a constant symphony in these woods, was now a rare, mournful trill, quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence. Lyra walked with her senses strained, trying to decipher the subtle cues of the land, the faint traces of the song that still lingered. Her birthmark was a near-constant throb, a dull compass needle pointing towards an unseen pole. Caelan, though his skepticism remained, proved an invaluable companion. His knowledge of tracking, of edible, though increasingly scarce, roots and berries found in the Peloponnesian highlands, and his sheer, stubborn resilience kept them moving when Lyra's spirit faltered. "The weeping crags of Gortys," Caelan announced one evening, as they made camp in a shallow cave overlooking the Lusius River valley. He pointed towards a series of jagged, dark cliffs in the distance, veiled in mist. "Alara's scroll mentioned them, did it not?" Lyra nodded, consulting the brittle parchment by the light of their meagre fire. "Yes. Where stone weeps for the dying sun, by the rushing Lusius, turn west when the shadow kisses the serpent's tooth." She looked up, her brow furrowed. "Serpent's tooth?" Caelan grunted, chewing on a tough piece of dried goat meat. "A rock formation further on, near the old ruins of Thisoa. Looks like a giant fang. Dangerous country, full of ravines and loose scree. The journey to the crags took another 2 days." The silence here was different, deeper. It wasn't just the absence of life, it was an ancient sorrow that seemed to emanate from the very stones of Greece. Water, stained dark by minerals, oozed from fissures in the rock face, resembling glistening tears. Lyra felt an overwhelming sense of grief pressing down on her, and she saw Caelan, for all his stoicism, make a small protective gesture, a ward against the cacodämones that might haunt such a desolate place. As they navigated a narrow pass beneath the shadow of the largest crag, the serpent's tooth Caelan had identified, Lyra felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of the song, which had been a fragile comfort, suddenly faltered, replaced by a dissonant, chilling whisper. "Someone is watching us," she breathed, her hand instinctively going to the bronze knife at her belt. Caelan scanned the desolate landscape, his eyes narrowed. Could be boar from Erymanthos, or worse, bandits driven from the cities by the blight. Stay alert. But it wasn't a boar, nor desperate men. As they rounded a bend, a figure stood silhouetted against the pale sky, perched on a high outcrop overlooking the valley, slender, unnervingly still, with an aura of cold grace. Even from a distance, Lyra could feel a strange, compelling energy radiating from the stranger. "Who goes there?" Calen called out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the Greek mountains. The figure did not reply, but with a movement too swift to follow was suddenly much closer, standing on a ledge just above them. It was a woman. Her beauty was stark, almost unnatural, her features sharp and finely chiseled, like an exquisite but lifeless statue from a forgotten temple. Her eyes, the color of amber flecked with gold, held a knowing, ancient light. She wore dark, close-fitting garments that seemed to absorb the wan sunlight, and around her neck a pendant of polished jet, perhaps obsidian from Melos, gleamed faintly. "Lost, little travellers of Arcadia?" Her voice was a melody, smooth and cool as river stones from the Eurotas, yet with an underlying resonance that vibrated unpleasantly in Lyra's bones. It was a voice that promised secrets, but also hinted at hidden dangers. "We are not lost," Calen said, his hand tightening on his staff. "We are on a journey through our own land." The woman's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "All journeys lead somewhere, or to someone. Perhaps you seek what I have found?" She gestured vaguely towards the deeper wilderness that stretched towards Laconia. "The land withers, does it not? The old songs of Pan and the nymphs fade." Lyra's breath caught. You know of the song?" The woman's amber eyes fixed on Lyra, a spark of keen interest igniting within them. "The Silent Song, yes, a quaint name for such a potent force. It is indeed fading, a tragedy for those who do not understand how to harness what remains." She glided down from the ledge with an almost serpentine grace, landing silently before them. "My name is Morwen, and you, child with the listening eyes?" "Lyra," she replied, feeling a strange mixture of fascination and unease. Morwen's presence was powerful, almost overwhelming. The dissonant whisper Lyra had felt earlier seemed to emanate from her, a subtle counterpoint to the true song. "Lyra," Morwen repeated, her voice lingering on the name. She glanced at the fern frond mark on Lyra's wrist, her smile widening slightly. "An auspicious mark. You are attuned, I see. Perhaps more than you know." She turned her attention to Calen. "And your protector, old one?" "Calen, and she needs no protector who offers veiled words and cold comfort." Thus the elder retorted, his distrust evident. Morwen chuckled, a low, melodious sound that held no warmth. "Skepticism is a shield for the fearful, Calen, but fear will not mend your dying world." Her gaze returned to Lyra. "The path to the Heartwood is treacherous, Lyra, fraught with peril, both seen and unseen, even here in familiar Arcadia. I have walked these blighted lands for longer than you can imagine. I know their secrets, from the peaks of Serene to the depths of the Messenian Gulf. Perhaps I can guide you, help you find what you seek." Lyra hesitated. There was a compelling certainty in Morwen's voice, a promise of knowledge that resonated with her own desperate need for answers. Yet Alara had always warned against power sought too easily, against voices that sang too sweet a tune. True harmony is earned, child, not seized. "Why would you help us?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. Morwen's smile was enigmatic. "Let us say I have an interest in seeing the song preserved. In the right hands, its power could reshape this land, bring forth an age of wonders even the Olympian gods would envy. Together, Lyra, with your attunement and my knowledge, we could do more than just mend. We could command." The word command jarred Lyra. It was the antithesis of everything Alara had taught her about the song, which was about listening, resonating, being a part of, not dominating. Calen stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Lyra and Morwen. "We thank you for your offer, but we will find our own way through these Greek lands." Morwen's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, the amusement fading from her expression. "A pity. The wilderness is not kind to the proud or the ignorant." She gave Lyra one last lingering look. "When you tire of fumbling in the dark, little song-finder, listen for my call. I will be near." And with a movement that was more a ripple in the air than a step, Morwen was gone, vanishing amongst the crags as silently as she had appeared. A chill lingered where she had stood. "Sorcery," Calen muttered, spitting on the ground. "Or one of those darker chthonic beings from before the Olympians. Keep your wits about you, Lyra. That one's words are poison." Lyra nodded, though a part of her, the part that yearned for understanding and a swift end to the land's suffering, felt a reluctant pull towards Morwen's confidence. The promise of guidance, of power, was a seductive lure in this desolate, dying world. They pressed on, the encounter with Morwen casting a long shadow over their journey. The terrain grew more difficult, the blight more pronounced. Twisted, skeletal trees clawed at the sky, their branches barren. The very earth beneath their feet felt brittle, devoid of life, even in the usually fertile valleys near ancient cities like Stymphalos or Phegalia. Once they found a petrified bird, its beak open mid-song, a tiny, tragic monument to the fading song. Lyra touched it gently, a profound sorrow welling within her. It was a tangible symbol of what they were fighting to save and what they stood to lose. Days blurred into a weary cycle of walking, searching for food, and fitful, uneasy sleep under the vast, starry Greek sky. Lyra's reliance on Elara's scroll and the faint hum of the song, sometimes amplified by the tingling of her birthmark, became absolute. She learned to distinguish the true whispers of the land from the deceptive echoes that sometimes seemed to emanate from the direction Morwen had taken. One evening, as they sheltered beneath an overhanging rock, near what Kaelin identified as the ruins of an old shrine to Artemis, a storm gathered. Not of rain. Rain had become a scarce blessing in Arcadia, but of a dry, biting wind that carried the scent of dust and decay from the parched plains of Elis. Lyra felt Morwen's presence again, not physically near, but as a subtle pressure in the air, a cold tendril reaching out to her mind. "You struggle so, little one," a voice whispered in her thoughts, smooth and insidious as Morwen's spoken words. "Why suffer so needlessly? The song is power. It can be bent, shaped. You have the key, the attunement. I can show you how to unlock its true potential, to make it serve you. Imagine, Lyra, a world reborn in your image, verdant and thriving under your gentle hand. No more decay, no more suffering, just harmony, directed by a will strong enough to impose it. Even the gods on Olympus would bow to such power." A vision bloomed in Lyra's mind. Arcadia lush and vibrant, but with an unnatural, controlled beauty. Herself standing tall on a peak like Taygetus, the song flowing through her like a river, bending to her every whim. It was a potent, seductive image. The weariness of the journey, the constant hunger, the fear of failure, all pressed down on her, making Morwen's offer seem like a lifeline. But then another image superimposed itself. Elara's gentle face, her eyes filled with a quiet wisdom, as they sat by their small fire in the hut near Mount Lycaon. The song is not a tool, Lyra. It is the breath of the world. You cannot command the wind. You can only learn to set your sails to it. The fern on Lyra's wrist pulsed sharply, a jolt of pure, clean energy that cut through the seductive haze of Morwen's vision. "No," Lyra whispered aloud, clutching her wrist. "The song is not for controlling. It is for sharing, for being." The mental pressure receded, leaving behind a residue of cold anger. Morwen's influence, though powerful, could not breach the core of Lyra's innate understanding, an understanding forged by Elara's love and her own deep, intuitive connection to the true nature of the song. Kaelin, who had been watching her with concern, grunted, "Fighting your own demons, girl, or has that sorceress found a way into your thoughts?" Lyra managed a weak smile. One of them, at least. Her whispers are hard to ignore. The encounter, though unseen, strengthened Lyra's resolve. Morwen's path was one of domination, a twisting of the song's essence. Elara's path, the one Lyra now knew she must follow, was one of harmony and perhaps profound sacrifice. The word resonance, which Elara had used in her final instruction, echoed in Lyra's mind. It was not about taking, but about giving back, about becoming a part of the whole. Their journey led them through the grove of whispering stones, located in a secluded valley not far from the ancient Arcadian capital of Lycosura, said to be the oldest city in Greece. Massive granite monoliths, worn smooth by eons of wind and rain, hummed with a faint, ancient energy. Here, the song was stronger, though still fractured. Lyra spent hours amongst the stones, her hands pressed against their cool surfaces, listening, trying to piece together the fragmented melodies. She felt closer to Elara here, as if her mentor's spirit lingered amongst these ancient sentinels. It was here, too, that Kaelin made a discovery. Tucked into a crevice in one of the largest stones, protected from the elements, was a small clay tablet, inscribed with symbols similar to those on Elara's scroll, but in an older, more angular script. He brought it to Lyra, his expression uncharacteristically excited. "Look, girl," More riddles for you, perhaps from the time before even the Pelasgians." Together they deciphered the markings. They spoke of the Anarasa, the breath of all, located in the deepest part of the Heartwood, a place shielded from mortal eyes somewhere in the treacherous heights of the Aroanian mountains or the hidden depths near the source of the river Styx. And then a chilling passage. When the breath falters, only a pure heart, willingly given, can relight the core. The weaver of song must unweave herself to become the song anew. Lyra's blood ran cold, unweave herself. The words implied a dissolution, a merging so complete that individuality would cease to exist. Sacrifice. This was the resonance Ilara had spoken of. Calen looked at her, his eyes filled with a dawning horror and a profound respect. "Lyra, this path. It asks for more than strength. It asks for everything." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the tablet. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but beneath it, a strange sense of peace was beginning to bloom. The ambiguity was gone. Her purpose, terrible and beautiful, was clear. "It is the only way, Calen," she said softly. "For the song, for Arcadia, for Greece." From the grove of whispering stones the path to the Heartwood became clearer, as if their understanding had opened a way. The land, though still blighted, seemed to resist them less. The faint whispers of the song grew stronger, pulling Lyra forward like an invisible thread, leading them north, towards the wild, untamed heart of the Peloponnese. They finally reached the edge of the Heartwood after many more days of travel, weary to the bone, but driven by a new, solemn urgency. It was not a grove in the conventional sense, but a vast, ancient caldera, a sunken bowl in the earth, hidden from the outside world by a ring of towering, black-barked mountains that Calen believed to be the mythical Follow Range, home once to centaurs. The air within was different, thick with an almost palpable stillness, a silence that was not empty, but pregnant with ancient power. At the center of the caldera, visible even from the rim, stood a colossal, petrified tree, its branches like skeletal arms reaching towards the sky, its trunk wider than any 3 oaks in Oakhaven. It was grey as ash, yet it pulsed with a faint internal luminescence, a dying ember in the heart of the world. This was the Anarasa. As Lyra and Calen began their descent into the caldera, a figure emerged from the shadows at the base of the great tree. Morwen. She was waiting for them, a triumphant, knowing smile on her lips. "So the little song-finder has found her way after all," Morwen said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast, silent space. "Or perhaps you simply led me to it as I intended." She gestured towards the Anarasa. "Magnificent, is it not? The very nexus of the silent song, and all its remaining power soon to be mine." Crystals, dark and gleaming like unholy relics, were embedded in the earth around the base of the petrified tree, forming a complex, ritualistic pattern. They pulsed with a faint, malevolent light, drawing what little energy remained from the Anarasa. "You are killing it!" Lyra cried, her voice raw with anguish. Morwen laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "Killing it? My dear, I am merely redirecting its essence. Why let such power diffuse into the uncaring earth, to be squandered on peasants and beasts in these forgotten Greek hills? It deserves a vessel worthy of its greatness, a will strong enough to wield it." Her amber eyes burned with ambition. "Join me, Lyra. Together we can drain the last of its song, and with it we shall rule. We shall build a new Arcadia, a testament to our strength, a beacon in this fading land of Greece." "Never," Lyra said, her voice trembling but firm. She stepped forward, Calen a hesitant shadow behind her. "The song is not for ruling. It is for living." "Such naivety," Morwen sneered. She raised her hands, and the dark crystals around the Anarasa glowed brighter, drawing visible tendrils of faint silvery light from the petrified tree. The great tree seemed to groan, a soundless vibration that Lyra felt deep in her soul. The air grew colder, the oppressive silence deepening. This was the moment. All the fear, all the doubt, fell away from Lyra, replaced by a profound clarity. She knew what she had to do. The words from the clay tablet echoed in her mind. The weaver of song must unweave herself to become the song anew. She looked at Calen, a silent farewell in her eyes. The old man met her gaze, his weathered face etched with sorrow, but also with a fierce, reluctant pride. He nodded, a single, almost imperceptible gesture of understanding. Lyra turned back to face the Anarasa and Morwen. She closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath, reaching inward for the core of her own being, for the tiny, flickering spark of the song that Alara had nurtured within her. Her fern-frond birthmark blazed with a soft emerald light. Instead of confronting Morwen directly, she walked towards the Anarasa, towards the dying heart of the world. Morwen watched her, a contemptuous smile on her lips, clearly believing Lyra was about to make some futile gesture of defiance. But Lyra did not try to fight. She did not try to control. She reached the base of the great, petrified tree, its cold, rough bark like ancient stone beneath her fingertips. And then she began to sing. It was not a song of words, nor a melody that human ears could easily discern. It was a resonance, a vibration that started deep within her chest, a pure, selfless offering of her own life force, her own essence. It was the sum of all the beauty she had ever known, the first anemone of spring on the slopes of Serene, the warmth of Alara's hand, the steadfastness of Kaelin's loyalty, the rustle of olive leaves in a summer breeze over the plains of Messenia. All her memories, all her hopes, all her love for the dying land of Greece, she poured into this silent, internal song. Her body began to shimmer, to grow translucent. The emerald light from her birthmark intensified, spreading outwards, bathing the Anarasa in its glow. The petrified wood seemed to soften, to absorb the light, the resonance. Morwen's smile faltered. She felt a power awakening, a power utterly alien to her understanding, selfless, giving, boundless. It was not a force to be controlled, but a tide to be joined. Her dark crystals flickered, their malevolent light dimming in the face of Lyra's pure incandescence. "What are you doing, fool girl?" Morwen hissed, a tremor of fear in her voice. She tried to intensify her ritual, to draw more power from the Anarasa, but the ancient tree now resonated with Lyra's song, resisting Morwen's parasitic pull. Lyra's song grew stronger, her form becoming less distinct, merging with the light, with the tree, with the very air. She felt her individual consciousness expanding, dissolving into something vast and interconnected. There was no pain, only a profound sense of release, of homecoming. She was unweaving herself, thread by thread, becoming the fabric of the song itself. A brilliant pulse of light and sound, the true silent song, vibrant and whole, erupted from the Anarasa, spreading outwards like a shockwave of pure life. It was a symphony of renewal, a chorus of burgeoning growth. The dark crystals around the tree shattered, their power extinguished. Morwen screamed, shielding her eyes from the blinding pure energy. It was anathema to her nature, to her philosophy of control and domination. The song, in its selfless, untamed glory, washed over her, stripping away her stolen power, unraveling her carefully constructed facade. Her form flickered, diminished, her beauty cracking like old porcelain. With a final choked cry, she was swept away by the surging tide of life, her essence scattered like dust on the wind, leaving no trace but a faint scent of ozone and bitter herbs. The wave of the silent song rolled out from the heartwood, across the caldera, and into the blighted lands of Arcadia and beyond, touching every corner of the Peloponnese. Where it passed, life erupted. Withered trees unfurled fresh green leaves, dry springs gushed with clear sweet water. Flowers carpeted the barren earth in a riot of colour, from the slopes of Parnon to the shores of the Saronic Gulf. The air filled with the hum of insects, the chatter of squirrels, the joyous chorus of birdsong, a symphony unheard for generations. The oppressive silence was broken, replaced by the vibrant, complex, harmonious music of a world reborn. Kaelin stood on the rim of the caldera, tears streaming down his weathered face, witnessing the miracle. He had seen Lyra dissolve into light, had felt the wave of the song wash over him, bringing warmth to his old bones and a clarity to his soul. He knew what she had done. He knew the price she had paid. There was no trace of Lyra at the base of the Anarasa. The great tree itself was no longer petrified. Its bark was supple, its branches adorned with new silver-green leaves, and it pulsed with a gentle, steady rhythm, the vibrant heartbeat of the renewed world. The heartwood was alive. Weeks later, when Kaelin returned to Oakhaven, he found a village transformed. The olive groves were budding, the fields showing tender green shoots. The Carrier Spring flowed abundantly, its waters clear and sweet. The despair was gone, replaced by a bewildered, cautious joy. They did not understand what had happened, only that the land had been given back to them. Kaelin told them of Lyra. He spoke not of sorcery or divine intervention from distant Olympus, but of a brave young woman who had loved Arcadia so deeply that she had given herself to heal it. He told them of the silent song, and how Lyra had become a part of its eternal music. No statues were raised to Lyra. No temples were built in her name, unlike the great heroes of old like Heracles or Theseus. But her legacy was everywhere in Greece. In the rustle of leaves in the sacred groves, in the murmur of flowing water from the Styx to the Pamissos, in the healthy laughter of children in villages from Laconia to Achaia, in the deep, restful silence of a forest at peace. A silence that was no longer empty, but full of unheard melodies. The people of Oakhaven, and all of Arcadia, spoke her name in hushed, reverent tones, Lyra, who sang the world awake. They learned to listen again, not just with their ears, but with their hearts, for the subtle rhythms of the land, for the echo of her sacrifice. Years passed. Calen grew older, his staff a constant companion. He often sat by the Caria spring, now shaded by a thriving wild fig tree, its fruit sweet and plentiful. He would close his eyes and listen. And sometimes, when the wind sighed gently through the Peloponnesian hills, and the forest held its breath in the golden light of a Greek afternoon, he thought he could hear it. A single perfect note, impossibly sweet, woven into the fabric of the world's vibrant, unending song. A note that sounded like a young woman's gentle sigh, a promise kept, a love made eternal. And he would smile, a quiet, knowing smile, for the girl who had become the music of Arcadia, the silent song of Greece itself.